The deafening crack of gunfire echoed through the dusty streets of Redemption Creek as Scarlett Zimmerman dropped to the saloon floor, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. It was 1875, and the Wyoming Territory was no place for a woman alone, a fact that became painfully clear as the notorious Blackwell Gang stormed through the swinging doors of the Rusty Nail Saloon. "Where's the girl?" The gang's leader, Jedediah Whitman, snarled, his weathered face contorting with rage as he scanned the room. "That banker's daughter owes us compensation for what her daddy did." Scarlett crawled behind the bar, her emerald silk dress a remnant of her former life in Boston gathering dust from the rough-hewn floorboards. 6 months ago, she'd come west following her father's bankruptcy and subsequent heart attack. The small inheritance she'd received had been just enough to purchase the struggling saloon, but no one had warned her about the debts her predecessor had accumulated with the local outlaws. "She ain't here," the bartender stammered, a man whose loyalty Scarlett had purchased with fair wages and decent treatment. "Left town this morning, a bottle shattered against the wall." "Liar," Whitman roared, his spurs jangling as he approached the bar. "We know she's here. The banker's pretty daughter, who thinks she can run a saloon in our territory without paying proper respects." Scarlett held her breath, knowing discovery meant certain death or worse. Her fingers closed around the small derringer hidden in her garter, but she knew its 2 bullets would hardly be enough against the 5 men who had entered. The saloon doors creaked open again, and a hush fell over the room. Heavy boot steps crossed the threshold, deliberate and unhurried. "Gentlemen," came a deep voice, calm as still water but with an undercurrent of steel. "I believe you're disturbing the peace in this establishment." Peering through a crack between the floorboards and the base of the bar, Scarlett saw a tall man standing in the doorway. Sunlight silhouetted his broad-shouldered frame, the brim of his Stetson casting a shadow across features that seemed carved from granite. A marshal's star gleamed on his chest. "Marshal Blake Forrester," Whitman sneered, his hand hovering near his holster. "This ain't your concern." "We've got business with the new saloon owner. Any business conducted in Redemption Creek is my concern," Forrester replied, not moving an inch from his position. "Especially when it involves harassing a law-abiding citizen." Whitman's laugh was ugly. "Law-abiding. That woman's father swindled half the territory before he died. We're just collecting what's owed." "Then you can file a legal claim," Forrester said, his voice hardening. "Now I'm asking you once to leave. There won't be a second request." The tension in the room stretched taut as a bowstring. Scarlett could hear her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. Then Whitman spat on the floor. "We'll be back, Marshal. And next time you might not be around to play hero." The outlaws retreated, but not before Whitman's cold eyes swept the room one last time. "Tell Miss Zimmerman we'll be seeing her real soon." When the door swung shut behind them, Scarlett released a shaky breath and emerged from her hiding place, dust clinging to her dress and auburn hair. "Are you all right, Miss Zimmerman?" Marshal Forrester asked, his deep blue eyes assessing her with concern. "Yes, thanks to you," she replied, straightening her spine and lifting her chin despite the tremble in her voice. "Though I fear they'll make good on their threat to return." "Likely so," he agreed, removing his hat to reveal dark hair with just a touch of silver at the temples. Scarlett guessed him to be in his early 30s, perhaps a decade older than her 22 years. His face bore the weathered lines of a man who spent his days under the harsh western sun. "Whitman and his boys have been terrorizing these parts for nearly a year now. They claim my father owed them money," Scarlett said, brushing dust from her skirts. "Your father was no saint, Miss Zimmerman, if you'll pardon my bluntness." Forrester's gaze was direct but not unkind. "He came west and set up a banking operation that promised more than it could deliver. When it collapsed, a lot of folks lost everything." "I'm well aware of my father's failings, Marshal," she replied stiffly. "I inherited his debts, not his dishonesty." Something like respect flickered in the lawman's eyes. That's admirable, but it won't matter to men like the Blackwell Gang. They don't distinguish between you and your father. What would you suggest I do? Abandon the only property I have left? The marshal placed his hat back on his head. No. But you might consider accepting some help. I didn't come west to be dependent on others, Scarlett said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her fear. There's a difference between dependence and survival, Miss Zimmerman. He tipped his hat. I'll have a deputy keep an eye on the place tonight, and if you've a mind to discuss this further, my office is across the street. After he left, Scarlett sank into a chair, her knees finally giving way. The bartender, a kindly older man named Hank, placed a whiskey in front of her without being asked. The marshal's a good man, Hank said as she took a fortifying sip of the amber liquid. Fought with the Union in the war, came west looking for peace but found trouble instead. Been keeping our town as safe as one man can, he seems. Capable, Scarlett admitted, more than capable. He's the reason the Blackwell Gang hasn't taken over completely. Hank wiped a glass with his apron. But even Blake Forrester can't be everywhere at once, Miss Scarlett. That night, after the last patron had stumbled home and Hank had retired to his room above the stables, Scarlett sat alone in her small quarters behind the saloon, a shotgun across her lap. Through the window, she could see the deputy Marshal Forrester had assigned, making his rounds in the silver moonlight. Sleep came fitfully, plagued by dreams of pursuit and capture. When dawn finally broke, Scarlett rose exhausted but resolute. After washing her face and securing her hair in a practical bun, she donned a simple blue dress and made her way across the street to the marshal's office. The building was modest but solid, much like the man himself. When she entered, Marshal Forrester was at his desk, a stack of wanted posters before him and a cup of coffee at his elbow. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted her, standing. "I'd hoped you might come by." "I've been considering your words, Marshal," Scarlett said, taking the seat he offered. "About accepting help, I'm not too proud to admit when I'm outmatched. That's wise of you." He poured her a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. "The Blackwell Gang isn't known for giving up easily. Why are they called that when their leader is named Whitman?" Scarlett asked, accepting the cup gratefully. Jedediah Whitman took over after the original leader, Samuel Blackwell, was hanged in Cheyenne last year, kept the name for its fearsome reputation. Forrester leaned back in his chair. "They started as cattle rustlers but graduated to robbery and worse. They've got a particular hatred for bankers, which explains their fixation on you. What can I do? I can't pay what they believe they're owed. The saloon barely breaks even." The marshal studied her for a long moment. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Zimmerman, one that might solve both our problems. I'm listening. I've been trying to build a case against the Blackwell Gang for months, but witnesses have a way of disappearing or changing their stories out of fear." His eyes held hers steadily. "I need someone on the inside, someone they wouldn't suspect." Scarlett nearly choked on her coffee. "You want me to spy on them, the very men who want to kill me?" "Not exactly. I want you to let it be known that you're struggling and might be amenable to their protection. If they think you're cooperating, they might let their guard down around you." "That's incredibly dangerous," Scarlett protested. "Yes," he agreed, "which is why I'd be close by at all times. I have a plan to make it work, but I need your trust." "And what happens if they discover the ruse?" Forrester's expression hardened. "They won't take you while I'm breathing, Miss Zimmerman, that I promise you." Something in his voice, the iron-clad certainty, made Scarlett believe him despite her misgivings. "What would I have to do?" "Act frightened, which shouldn't be difficult because the danger is real. Let it be known through Hank that you're considering arrangements with local protection. The Blackwell Gang has spies everywhere. They'll hear about it. And then we set a trap," Forrester said, his blue eyes glinting with determination. "One that ends with Jedediah Whitman and his boys behind bars or 6 feet under if it comes to that." Scarlett took a deep breath. "I came west to make a new start, Marshal. Not to get killed carrying out the law's work. I understand your hesitation." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "But consider this. As long as the Blackwell Gang operates freely, you'll never be safe in Redemption Creek. They'll keep coming back, demanding more until there's nothing left to give. The truth of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. I need time to think. Of course, he nodded. But not too much time. Whitman's not known for his patience. Scarlett returned to her saloon, mind whirling with the marshal's proposition. As she approached, she noticed a folded piece of paper nailed to the door. Her heart sank as she read the crude message, "Tonight, midnight, be ready to negotiate or burn." The decision had been made for her. Hurrying back to the marshal's office, she found Forrester saddling a horse, preparing to make rounds. "They've left a message," she said, thrusting the paper at him. "I'll do it. Whatever your plan is, I'm in." Relief and concern warred in his expression. "Good, we don't have much time to prepare." As evening approached, Scarlett found herself behind the bar of the Rusty Nail, serving drinks with trembling hands while Marshal Forrester's plan took shape around her. He'd enlisted 3 trusted deputies who were positioned strategically throughout the saloon, disguised as ordinary patrons. Forrester himself had changed from his marshal's clothes into those of a common cowhand, his star hidden away. He sat at a corner table, seemingly absorbed in a game of solitaire, but Scarlett caught his watchful gaze whenever she looked his way. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. The regular customers dwindled, sensing the tension in the air, until only the deputies, Forrester, and a few oblivious drunks remained. At 11:30, Hank approached her, his wizened face creased with worry. "Miss Scarlett, maybe you should go to your room. Whatever's coming, you don't want to be out front when it arrives." "Thank you, Hank, but I'll stay." She managed to smile. "I need to face this head-on." The old bartender nodded reluctantly. "You've got grit, just like your mama must have had. I'll be upstairs with my shotgun if you need me." As the clock neared midnight, the saloon doors burst open, and Jedediah Whitman strutted in, flanked by 4 men with bandanas pulled up over their faces and guns drawn. "Evening, Miss Zimmerman," Whitman said with mock politeness. "I believe we have business to discuss." Scarlett straightened, affecting a fearful but resigned demeanor. "Mr. Whitman, I expected you might call, smart girl." He approached the bar, his eyes cold and calculating. "I understand you're having trouble making ends meet. We can help with that." "For a price," she responded, keeping her voice steady. "Everything has a price in this world." He smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Your father understood that, even if he chose not to honor his debts. What exactly do you want from me?" Scarlett asked, aware of Forrester shifting subtly in her peripheral vision. "Protection money to start. 30% of your earnings." "That's robbery," she protested, genuine indignation flaring. "That's business," Whitman corrected, "but there might be another way to settle accounts." His gaze raked over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "A pretty woman like you has other assets to offer." From his corner, Forrester's hand moved to his concealed weapon, but Scarlett gave a nearly imperceptible shake of her head. They needed to let this play out according to plan. "I won't be intimidated or degraded," she said firmly. "I can offer 15% of the saloon's earnings paid weekly, that's all." Whitman laughed. "You misunderstand, Miss Zimmerman. This isn't a negotiation." He nodded to one of his men who moved behind the bar and grabbed Scarlett's arm roughly. "You're coming with us. Your father's debt can be worked off in other ways at our camp. Take your hands off me." Scarlett struggled, the planned resistance now becoming genuine fear as the outlaw's grip tightened painfully. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," came Forrester's voice, deadly calm as he stood, his gun now visible and trained on Whitman. The outlaw leader turned slowly. "Well, if it isn't the marshal playing dress-up, should have known you'd be sniffing around the pretty new saloon owner." "Let her go," Forrester demanded, his aim unwavering. "Or what?" Whitman sneered. "You're outnumbered, Marshal, am I?" As if on cue, the 3 deputies rose from their tables, weapons drawn for a moment. The tableau held 5 outlaws against 4 lawmen, with Scarlett caught in the middle. Then Whitman smiled, a chilling expression devoid of humor. "Seems we're at an impasse." "No impasse," Forrester replied. "You're under arrest for extortion, threatening a citizen, and attempted kidnapping, not to mention the outstanding warrants for robbery and murder. You think these badges scare me?" Whitman's hand hovered near his holster. "We've faced worse odds." "Not with me, you haven't," Forrester said, and something in his tone made even the hardened outlaw hesitate. "Outlaws like you have tried to tear women away from their homes before. It doesn't end well for them." The man holding Scarlett tightened his grip. "Boss, we could use her as a shield. Get out of here, you touch one hair on her head," Forrester interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "and you won't leave this saloon breathing. That's a promise." The conviction in his words sent a shiver down Scarlett's spine. This wasn't just a marshal doing his duty. There was something personal in his protective fury. Whitman assessed the situation, his eyes darting between Forrester's unwavering aim and the determined faces of the deputies. Finally, he raised his hands slightly. "Easy now, Marshal. No need for bloodshed. We were just having a conversation with the lady." "The conversation is over," Forrester said. "Guns on the bar," slowly. For a tense moment, Scarlett thought Whitman would refuse, triggering the bloodbath they'd all been hoping to avoid. But then, with deliberate slowness, he withdrew his pistol and placed it on the bar top. "Boys," he commanded, and his men reluctantly followed suit, including the one holding Scarlett, who released her with a shove. Scarlett stumbled but quickly regained her footing, moving behind the bar to put distance between herself and the outlaws. The deputies moved in, collecting weapons and producing handcuffs. "You won't hold us for long," Whitman growled as his wrists were secured behind his back. "We've got friends in high places." "Not as high as the gallows in Cheyenne," Forrester replied, holstering his weapon as the situation came under control. As the deputies led the outlaws away, Whitman stopped beside Scarlett. "This isn't over, banker's daughter, not by a long shot." "It is for now," Forrester said, stepping between them. "And if you ever threaten Miss Zimmerman again, you'll answer to me personally." When the saloon emptied of all but Scarlett and Forrester, the tension that had been holding her upright seemed to drain away, leaving her legs wobbly. She sank onto a bar stool, adrenaline giving way to exhausted relief. "You did well," Forrester said, his expression softening as he assessed her. "Are you hurt?" "Just shaken," she admitted, "and surprised it worked so smoothly. Don't be deceived by appearances." "Whitman's right, they have connections. We'll need to get them to Cheyenne quickly before anyone can interfere with justice." "Will that be the end of it?" Scarlett asked, not quite daring to hope. Forrester sighed, taking the stool beside her. "The end of the Blackwell Gang, hopefully. But in my experience, when one group of outlaws falls, another rises to take its place. The West is still wild, Miss Zimmerman. Please," she said, meeting his gaze, "after tonight I think you can call me Scarlett." A smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Blake," he offered in return. "Thank you, Blake." She hesitated, then added, "You said something earlier about outlaws tearing women away from their homes. It sounded personal." The marshal's expression darkened. "It was. My sister was taken by raiders when we were young by the time I found her." He shook his head. "I couldn't save her, but I made a promise that day that I would never stand by while the innocent suffered if I could prevent it." The confession moved Scarlett deeply. "I'm sorry about your sister, but I'm grateful for your protection tonight." "It's my job," he said, but the way he looked at her suggested it had become more than duty. In the days that followed, Blake escorted the prisoners to Cheyenne himself, leaving Scarlett under the watchful eye of his deputies. When he returned a week later, the territorial judge had come with him, and justice was swift. Jedediah Whitman and 2 of his men were sentenced to hang for their crimes, while the others received lengthy prison terms. Redemption Creek celebrated the downfall of the Blackwell Gang, with an impromptu gathering at the Rusty Nail. For the first time since taking ownership, Scarlett saw the saloon filled with genuinely happy patrons, their fear of the outlaws replaced by relief and gratitude toward the marshal who had brought them down. Blake stopped by late in the evening, when most of the revelers had gone home. He found Scarlett behind the bar, tallying the night's substantial earnings. "Looks like business is improving," he observed. "Dramatically," she agreed with a smile. "Apparently, people drink more freely when they're not afraid of being robbed or worse on their way home. Who would have thought?" His answering smile transformed his usually solemn face, crinkling the corners of his eyes in a way that made Scarlett's heart flutter unexpectedly. "Will you have a drink to celebrate?" she offered, reaching for a bottle of the good whiskey she kept for special occasions. "Just one," he accepted, watching as she poured 2 glasses. "I'm still on duty, technically." "Always the lawman," she teased, sliding his glass across the bar. "It's all I know how to be," he admitted. "Has been since I pinned on this star 15 years ago." "I don't believe that," Scarlett said. "I've seen other sides of you this past week, the protector, the strategist, the friend." He looked down at his drink. "Those are still parts of being a marshal, perhaps." She circled the bar to sit beside him. "But what about the man who looks at me when he thinks I'm not noticing? Is that part of your official duties too?" Blake's eyes widened slightly, a flush creeping up his neck. "I apologize if I've been inappropriate." "You haven't," she interrupted gently. "In fact, I've found myself hoping you would look more often." The confession hung between them, charged with possibilities. Blake set his glass down, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Scarlett, I'm not a man of many words or grand gestures. My life has been dedicated to upholding the law, often at the expense of personal connections." "I understand," she said, disappointment beginning to well within her. "No, let me finish," he continued. "What I'm trying to say is that meeting you has made me question whether that's enough anymore. When Whitman threatened you, when I saw the fear in your eyes, I realized I would do anything to keep you safe, not just as a marshal protecting a citizen, but as a man who couldn't bear the thought of harm coming to you." Scarlett's heart pounded in her chest. "Blake." "I know it's sudden," he said quickly, "and perhaps improper, given the circumstances of our acquaintance. But I find myself drawn to your courage, your determination to make a new life despite the obstacles. If you would permit me, I'd like to call on you properly when you're not in danger and I'm not required to save you from outlaws." A laugh bubbled up from Scarlett's chest, relief and joy mingling. "I would like that very much." Their hands met on the bar top, fingers intertwining with tentative wonder. In that moment, Scarlett knew that whatever challenges lay ahead and in the Wild West, there would surely be many they would face them together. The saloon owner and her marshal, bound by a promise made in the heat of danger and sealed in the quiet aftermath of victory. As spring turned to summer in 1875, Redemption Creek witnessed the unlikely courtship of Marshal Blake Forrester and Scarlett Zimmerman. Their evening walks became a familiar sight to the townsfolk, who watched with approval as the stern lawman softened in the presence of the spirited saloon owner. For Scarlett, the saloon thrived under her management, becoming a respectable establishment where even the town's more conservative residents felt comfortable gathering. With Blake's encouragement, she added simple meals to the offerings, hired a piano player for weekend evenings, and established strict rules against excessive drunkenness and fighting. For Blake, the capture of the Blackwell Gang had enhanced his already formidable reputation, leading to an offer of promotion to federal marshal that would require relocating to Denver. It was an honor he'd once would have accepted without hesitation, but now found himself reluctant to consider. On a warm evening in late August, Blake took Scarlett riding along the creek that gave the town its name. They stopped at a picturesque bend where wildflowers grew in abundance, spreading a blanket beneath a cottonwood tree for a simple picnic. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something important," Blake said as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Scarlett's heart constricted. She'd heard about the Denver offer through town gossip and had been dreading this conversation. "The marshal position in Denver," surprise flickered across his face. "News travels fast." "It's a small town," she reminded him, trying to keep her tone light despite the heaviness in her chest. Everyone knows the federal marshal himself came to offer you the job. Blake nodded slowly. It's a significant opportunity. More resources, better pay, the chance to make a difference on a larger scale. You should take it, Scarlett said, the words costing her dearly. You deserve the recognition after everything you've done here. I've been thinking about it, he admitted, his gaze fixed on the horizon, weighing what I would gain against what I would lose. What would you lose? She asked softly, his eyes met hers, filled with an emotion that made her breath catch. Everything that matters, this town. The people I've sworn to protect. He took her hand. You, Blake, I turned it down, he said simply. I told them I'm needed here. Joy surged within her, but Scarlett tempered it with concern. Are you certain? I wouldn't want you to regret passing up such an opportunity. The only regret I would have is leaving you, Blake said, his voice low and fervent. Scarlett, these past months have shown me what truly matters in life. It's not titles or recognition. It's having someone to come home to, someone who makes each day worth living. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Scarlett's heart nearly stopped as he opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a modest diamond. This belonged to my mother, he explained. I've carried it with me for years, waiting for the right woman to give it to. He took a deep breath. Scarlett Zimmerman, I love you with everything I am. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears welled in Scarlett's eyes as she nodded, too overcome for words at first. Yes, she finally managed. Yes, Blake, I will marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, their lips met in a tender kiss that held all the promise of their future together, a future that had seemed impossible when Outlaws had first threatened to tear her away, until the cowboy marshal had said, "Not while I'm breathing." They were married in October, when the aspen trees turned golden and the first hints of winter crispness touched the air. The entire town turned out for the wedding, held in the small church with a celebration afterward at the Rusty Nail, which Scarlett had renamed the Marshal's Lady in honor of her new husband. Life in Redemption Creek continued to have its challenges. Outlaws still passed through, testing the Marshal's resolve. The harsh Wyoming winters tested everyone's endurance, but Blake and Scarlett faced each obstacle together, their love deepening with each trial overcome. In the spring of 1877, Scarlett gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Blake's lost sister. Standing by the cradle, watching his wife sing softly to their child, Blake Forrester knew he had made the right choice in staying. Denver could offer position and power, but Redemption Creek had given him a family and a home worth protecting with his last breath. I was thinking, Scarlett said one evening as they sat on the porch of the home they'd built on the edge of town, watching the sunset with Elizabeth sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. Perhaps it's time to expand the Marshal's Lady. The town is growing and we could add rooms for travelers, make it a proper hotel. Blake smiled at his wife's entrepreneurial spirit. Whatever you want to do, I'll support you, though I suspect I'll have my hands full keeping order as the town grows. We make quite the team, don't we? Scarlett mused, the marshal and the saloon owner. The best team in the Wyoming Territory, he agreed, leaning over to kiss her gently. And to think it all started because some outlaws tried to take you away. And a certain marshal wouldn't allow it, she finished, her eyes shining with love and gratitude for the man who had become her protector, partner, and the father of her child. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across their porch, Blake wrapped his arm around his family, drawing them close against the evening chill. In the growing town of Redemption Creek, amid the wildness of the Wyoming Territory, they had found what many spend a lifetime seeking: a love worth fighting for and a home worth defending, come what may.